Before wallets, banks, or even paper bills, the world ran on trade, barter, or trust. Like if you needed a new roof, you'd have to track down a builder, but they might not want to work for you. That moment it created the first coin and gave birth to money as we know it. Well, there's actually some debate about exactly which coin was the first, but most historians agree that credit for its invention goes to the ancient Lydians, who had been creating stamped ingots of electrum, a natural alloy of gold and silver, for at least half a century before the Lydians took over. But it doesn't really matter, because once they started, they popularized the practice. And soon, every city-state in Lydia was producing its own coinage, and they weren't the only ones. Soon, the Greeks, the Thracians, and the Etruscans all started producing their own coins too. These ingots didn't have any pictures on them, though, just the weight stamped into them. In warfare, and the reverse featured an owl, her sacred animal with olive branches. The coin's design also contained secret messages that helped to combat counterfeiting. See, it's not enough to make a mold of someone's coin and fill it with metal. And as Alexander the Great's empire expanded, his armies carried Athenian tetradrachms all across the known world. Eventually, the Roman Empire took over and replaced the tetradrachm with the denarius. But it was based on the same principles and followed the same basic format. The averser head side showing the face of the emperor, and the reverser tail side displaying whatever they wanted, usually a military victory or a symbol of the empire. During the Han Dynasty, China began producing their own gold and silver coins and spread throughout the empire. Eventually, the Chinese developed their own paper money. Then the Spanish, and then our boys over at the Bank of International Settlements. Paper money has certainly had its ups and downs throughout history. The coin features a queen on one side and the words "Let us get Brexit done" on the other. That honor belongs to the Niue Island, a self-governing island off the coast of New Zealand that has no gold or silver reserves and whose people rely on tourism to survive. Not to mention they're lighter, so if you stuffed a bunch of them in your pocket, it wouldn't feel like you just shoved a bunch of washers in there. But whether we move toward a plastic future or return to a metallic one, we can all agree that without that first coin, none of it would be possible. In 1986, they began producing plastic coins to attract tourists. But the UK coin is the first plastic coin to be adopted by a major Western nation. If it wasn't for you, we wouldn't be able to give Greece its due. Oh, never mind. Thanks anyway. Okay, fine, that last one was a joke, but the rest is true. On April 30th, 2020, the Royal Mint released a new 5-pound coin made completely out of plastic. For example, it played a big role in both world wars. During World War I, the U.S. government printed nearly $600 million in paper money, a quarter of the entire national currency at the time. Then during World War II, counterfeiting became such a concern that the U.S. government switched the backing of their money from gold to the full faith and credit of the government itself. But perhaps the most interesting development in coinage happened in the 7th century CE, when the Islamic world introduced the first paper money, though technically it was more of a token than actual paper money. See, the caliphate was rich and wealthy and well. They didn't want to waste their precious metals on coinage. Instead, they issued tokens made out of clay, stone, and even bone, which acted as vouchers that could be exchanged for precious metals. You need to somehow prove that the coin is authentic, otherwise people will just make tons of copies. So, to prevent counterfeiting, the Athenians put secret marks on their coins that wouldn't be known to counterfeiters. In the modern era, coins are mostly symbolic and serve as a way to remember important historical figures or events. Since 1950, the Royal Mint has produced coins to celebrate everything from Queen Elizabeth's coronation to the Beatles. Although admittedly, those are more valuable to Beatles fans than collectors. These marks varied greatly and were sometimes changed every single year, but they could be simple as a scratch mark or as complex as a series of embossed dots. The choice of Athena makes sense, since Athens was famously known for its strategic prowess during the Persian Wars. But eventually the Persian Empire conquered Athens and minted their own coins, but that didn't mean the end of the Athenian coin. The symbol of Athena persisted throughout the region. It is probably the reason why Athena is still referenced as the goddess of wisdom thousands of years later. In 284 BCE, King Antiochus, the first of the Seleucid Empire, which controlled most of the Middle East after Alexander the Great's death, introduced the first gold coin. Made out of pure gold, it was appropriately named the siglos. It weighed a pound, literally, and contained roughly $2.5 million worth of gold. Today, it's extremely rare to find one in good condition, and it can go for millions of dollars. And the owl was a good choice for a symbol too. Since owls are nocturnal, they can represent the moon and function as a nighttime equivalent of the sun. Plus, olive oil was a major export of Athens, so it was a nice way to show off the wealth of their empire. That way, if you found a coin lying around, you'd know who to take it to so they could tell you if it was counterfeit. And that honor went to the Greek Empire, specifically the Athenian Empire, which included many of the independent Greek city-states, including Lydia. That exact weight of silver became the standard weight for all coins throughout Greece. And soon, everyone from Lydia to Syracuse was producing coins that weighed exactly 175 grains of silver. Even if they weren't necessarily Athenian. In 600 BCE, Athens established a mint that produced a universal currency that would be accepted throughout the empire. Their first coin was the Euboic tetradrachma. Dram was the name of a unit of currency used throughout much of the ancient world. And while we don't know exactly how they chose the number 4, maybe it was just because they liked the sound of it. The name stuck and has been used for centuries to describe coins ever since. But since each city could produce its own, it led to a little bit of a problem, a different coin from a different city. Because each coin was only worth what the person holding it thought it was worth, eventually things got confusing. Also, the Lydians weren't the only ones doing this. Chinese had already been using cowrie shells as currency for centuries, and the kingdoms of Kush and Aksum had been minting their own gold and silver coins. Fun fact, Lydia was located in what is today Western Turkey, except back then it was called Ionia, and it was a collection of independent city-states. The region was prosperous thanks to its fertile lands and control over trade between the Mediterranean and the rest of Anatolia. Now obviously coins aren't foolproof. Counterfeits exist. Inflation happens. Governments change hands, and suddenly your $20 bill? Whoa, and buy you anything other than the disappointment of your friends when they realize you're not paying for shots anymore. But until those problems were eventually solved hundreds of years later, the very existence of money transformed civilizations and made things infinitely more transactional. They might want something else from you, like a new plow for their farm. So instead, you'd offer them a deal, your services as a carpenter in exchange for their services as a bricklayer. But that too requires an awful lot of trust, which isn't always easy to come by. And also, you just spent the whole day bartering. You're hungry now, and all the restaurants are closed because it's Sunday. Yeah, life was tough before money. But everything changed the moment someone pressed a symbol into a small piece of metal. So let's talk about where that first coin came from, where it came from, and what it looked like. Now, there's no record of exactly how or why the Lydians invented coins, but archaeologists have found evidence that they may have been inspired by the nearby kingdom of the Phrygians. But despite these examples, we couldn't say for sure why the Lydians decided to start minting coins or who made the first one, but how did it work? Well, each city minted its own coins, but they would often include the city's name in the design. The solution: a standardized system that outlined exactly what every coin was worth. The tetradrach was a silver coin that weighed exactly 175 grains of silver and was subdivided into smaller units that could be easily broken up and traded. But what did the actual coin look like? The front of the coin featured the head of Athena, the Greek goddess of wisdom. But that's not all. It was these standards, quality, and secrecy that made Athenian coinage so respected. But regardless of who was ruling, the importance of standardized coins became apparent. Now they were even being used throughout Egypt. And the best part of it all? They kept the owl. But coins continued to evolve throughout history. But the use of gold and silver wasn't limited to royalty. These pieces of non-precious metal quickly became a hit among merchants, and soon the practice spread throughout the rest of the world. But regardless of any of its flaws, paper money is convenient, and that's why we use it. Well, along with coins. But until recently, coins have remained largely unchanged since the days of the Roman Empire. That is until 2020, when the UK released its first ever £5 coin, made entirely out of plastic. It's not the first plastic coin in the world. As for why anyone would bother making a coin out of plastic, well, they're cheaper to produce and more durable. So thank you, Lydians. Thank you so much.